Meeting of the Albany Public Library Board of Trustees. First thing on the agenda is public comment. Is anyone here from the public who'd like to make a comment? Okay. Moving on, we'll start with a presentation or a discussion with Juliet Price from Albany Promise, or formerly with Albany Promise. Juliet came to us in December to talk about the study results that she did with Albany Public Library on the summer reading program. And after that, after talking to a few people, realized there were several different interpretations of what the results meant. And I thought it would be helpful to make sure that we are understanding what they found. I know there was a lot of discussion that day about what to do about the results, and that is not the purpose of this discussion. This is really to understand what the results are, because they are pretty important and can impact how the library decides to move forward with summer reading. So, Juliet. And we're getting handouts of a slide that you saw back in December momentarily.
Sure. So, hello again. So Karen asked if I could come back and just chat a little bit about, especially this last little slide, which I think you guys may have seen and are getting copies of. So we will go into, so I won't review how we got to the total sample size and all those kinds of things. We'll just kind of go right into the impact piece of it. Although I'm happy to come back around to that if you guys want me to. So the first piece of this was that the folks, the youth who signed up for the program was a representative sample of who lives in the city in those age groups, which means basically your outreach and your targeting efforts were really, really solid, and they got a representative sample of who lives in the city within those age groups. Where we saw the shift happen is the youth who actually what we called completed the program. So they needed to have turned in one or more card for us to consider them as completers in the program. That's when we saw the sample of youth who participated drop off and not become a representative sample of the youth in the city. So that was like finding number one was the representation of who was involved. So, and that's just, again, that clarity between who signed up and then who actually came back and did additional programming. The second finding regarding the impact of the program. So very specifically, what happened with the youth who did participate, who we had an understanding of what was their summer slide rate. What we found was that there was a significance of participation for the students who were above the 50th percentile that spring. So in the NWEA testing that happens, it's what we call a norm reference test. So it gives us, it basically tells us how are these children doing compared to their peers nationally. And so the group of students where we did find an impact was this group that was in over the 50th percentile. So those were the students who participated, that we found an impact, and it did reduce their summer slide, how much they slid in the summer. And that's what this table at the bottom was showing us, was what kind of slide, what was the variation that we found in that. So those were like our key findings, but I'm happy to field questions if that's more helpful. Or anything else you want me to cover?
I just want to summarize, and then I want to ask a few questions of the trustees. So one is, when you say 50%, better than 50 percentile, what does that mean, and who are you comparing the kids to?
Yeah, so the students who are above the 50th percentile in the NWEA, when students take the NWEA, it's not just students in Albany, it's students all across the nation. So the best metaphor or just kind of thought to hold in your mind is the SAT. So the SAT takes place every single year, but if some of you have had children in 2 separate years, you know that students can get the same score, the same raw score, but end up in different percentiles. Because it's not saying how many questions did you answer right, it's saying everyone who took this test, here's where you stand relative to all of those students. So when we say it's above the 50th percentile for this student group, it was above the 50th percentile that year that they took the test, compared to all students in the country who took the test.
And then how does that relate to students in the Albany district itself?
Yeah, so this is kind of this is where it starts to get sort of a little tricky to hold all of the pieces in our head. So in a perfectly fair system, where every child had the same amount of opportunity, you would see that sort of standard bell curve, where you would see an equal distribution of students having those scores. In a city, in an under-resourced population like we have here, we see fewer students being above that 50th percentile. So the number to kind of keep in mind is about 30% of our student population is above the 50th student percentile. If you went to a place like Niskayuna, per se, or sort of any of these other sort of ultra high resource districts, you would see greater numbers of student populations being above the 50th percentile. Does that kind of make sense how that's, yeah, it's a skewed population sample.
So just to wrap that up, then by saying that the summer slide was reduced on children in this, participated in summer reading, that we're doing better than 50% at the NWEA nationally, that in Albany only really represents the top 30% of students in our district.
That's correct.
So the impact of summer slide is that are kids participating in this program is really just on the top 30% of students in our district.
Right.
Okay.
Yes. And that's where it's a little hard. The 50th percentile versus how many students does that represent of our total population of students?
What questions does that raise for you guys? Yeah.
So basically you're saying that if you're already high performing, it helps you, and if you're not performing well on reading, meh.
So here's what I would say about that, is it's hard when we use phrases like high performing, because in a room, right, with lots of different, everybody has their own sort of cutoff to high performing.
Over 50th percentile.
So that's where we try and just use the numbers to just get at like who are we talking about, just because we've noticed that in large group conversations, some people may think that you have to be in the 90th percentile or above to high perform, right? And so that's what we shy away from using words like that, and we look at percentages explicitly.
Well, wouldn't being in the 50th percentile or above mean you're average or above in your reading?
So it's not an
Put
average.
language on it?
Yep, so it's not an average. So the 50th percentile means you're outperforming the other 50% of the kids in America, like yourself, taking that same test. It's not the same as an average. Does that make sense?
No,
I think
like
it's
yourself.
semantics.
So it's normed against all of the other students taking it. So it takes out English as a new language students, it takes out special education students, it really tries to hold constant all the different variables that go into these kinds of things. That's what I mean. So like all the second graders in America, they look at that, and then they norm it against, they take out certain populations. That's why, so another kind of thing to compare it to is the 3 through 8 regions testing. The average in the state is that 32% proficiency rate. But that average looks different depending on which students you're looking in, what districts you're looking at, right? That's why it's not an average when you look at a percentile. Because it's not, we don't have, that's not, in Albany if you were to look at it, what is the average? 50% is not the average. The curve is pulled back. You would see an average that is much lower.
But you're in a group of above average readers, is what I'm saying.
Yes, well, that's that 50th percent, yes.
Yeah.
You're above 50% of your
You're in a
groups.
group of, so if you're in a group of above average readers that are doing okay or above
Right.
in reading, then you're helped by, your summer slump is
Yes.
lowered by this.
Yes,
Apparently, if you are not in that group, your summer slump didn't change.
that's correct. Yep, that's it.
Right, and so does that raise any other questions for anyone else?
I hate to be kind of dense, but could
It's
you
okay.
walk us through the
Sure.
chart at the bottom,
Yes.
exactly what, you
Yeah.
know, the ones in the issues on the y and the x-axis are, and how, you know, how you would interpret the average change.
Yes. So we had 3 categories of students when you look down the left-hand column. We had no involvement students, so these were students who were in the same cutoff age range and in the City School District of Albany that were not involved. They did not sign up.
Is it just this group?
Yes,
Okay, so
they
yeah.
did not, so they did not sign up, but they are like their peers in this group. So they are also above the 50th percentile. And I'll show you how that works out in a second. Then your second group is the ones who signed up but did not participate in the program, so they never came back to the library, they never turned in a card. And then the third is that what we titled completion, meaning they signed up and they came back at least once in the summer. What you see in the spring 2018 percentile, this is where you start to see, these were the students who were above the 50th percentile mark, and this was their average percentile. So this is why these numbers are very high. So the average, for the completers, they were already in the 79th percentile
And
in
this,
the spring.
and this is
the
based
full-
on,
This is the NWEA.
okay.
Yep, so this is the spring, right before they signed up. Then in the fall, this is their subsequent percentile score. And these are averages, these are all together. The average change is what we found when we looked at the matched groups. So when you actually took a look at student by student in each of these 3 groups, what was the change in the population? So when you look at the no involvement, so these are students who did not sign up for the program but are in the City School District of Albany and they were above the 50th percentile. Their average spring percentile score was the 72nd percentile. In the fall, they tested into the 68th percentile, and this was the average change. The average change is based on points. It's not percentiles. Just kind of note that. So the folks who did not have any involvement at all slid 4.6 points. That's their summer slide. The ones who signed up only, but we didn't ever see them back, slid 1.8 points, and the ones that at least showed up once, they slid only 0.3 points, and this is a model that does hold up statistically significant. So that's who these 3 groups of folks are.
I guess my question is, just like you said about the SATs, you could take it one time and get one score and be a 1 percentile, and you take it again at a different time and be a different percentile. How does that compare to this? And is there enough statistical data, since it's only been done 1, 2, with these findings?
So this holds up statistically. Let me answer that question first. Yes, this holds up statistically, and the NWA is a national norm reference test, and it is what we holds predictive of our state testing as well. So yes, the statistical findings of this year hold. And I'm just gonna forget your first question, of course.
It was about the fact that you said if you took the SATs one time, you could be in
Yes.
1 percentile, and then you take it again, you could be in a different percentile depending on who, like how you did, how other people did. So my question is that
Yes.
an issue here?
It's not, and part of the reason it's not is that it holds constant every time they take it. So you would hope that if there's, if kids are advancing, their scores in the spring would be lower than their scores in the fall, right? That they're learning as they go along. That's where, like, if you took the SAT twice or 3 times, you'd improve, right? You take it you sort of learn where your deficiencies are, you study on those deficiencies, you keep going, right? Like that's kind of, I don't know if that kind of makes sense.
Well, I'm just thinking like the SATs, there's been a time where like someone has taken it and someone's taken it again, and like you said, number of questions right, your score could have gone down even though you've gotten more questions right based on that. So I was just wondering how that worked here.
So these are different tests that they would take. It's not always the same one. Unlike the SAT where hypothetically it's asking the same types of questions.
I guess in your explanation, I lose focus on who you were targeting and who actually benefited, such as the underserved or needy person. How many of what was the benefit?
So the only benefit, the only impact that we found was on this group above the 50th percentile, which in our context is only about 30, it's like 31 or 32%.
So if I didn't need your help, you helped me, but if I do need your help, you're no help at all.
Yeah.
Basically,
Well, not that we. Right.
is that what you said?
It's the top 30% performers.
So I think what we might need to do is to take a look at the program and see how we can be more intentional about engaging the children that we have most concern about. Because my suspicion is that even the students who only signed up, that they probably came from an environment that was going to read anyway. They just didn't come to this program because maybe they were doing something else. So I think that it may just suggest that we have some additional work to do.
And I think to your question, where you were heading, Brenda, is also taking a look at that first finding, who signed up versus who came back. Because that's also, to Arlene's point, it's telling us a lot about who, the targeting worked, but there was a huge amount of folks, youth, who did not come back.
Retention.
Yep.
So I don't know, I'm just a little surprised by, like, if you look at the sign up only people, it looks like just thinking about being in a summer reading program halts your slump by a couple of percentage points. So they just basically thought about it. They signed up.
So I think to
They didn't
Arlene's,
come.
point, this is a self-selecting program. Unlike public school K-12, where it's not self-selecting, everyone shows up. This is a program where if you're interested, you show up, and if you're not interested, no one comes and knocks on your door. And so this is not uncommon to find in programs where there's self-selection at play. Yeah.
They were going to be exposed to something anyway. They just had something else to do and didn't come. That's what I suspect. But it does show that if you do come and you do participate in the program, that there is some benefit. You just have to figure out how to capture the children that we really need to become involved with this program and what we need to do to be more intentional in our work. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
Any other comments or questions? Andy?
I hate to be dense about this, but this fourth bullet,
Yep.
and I know you probably said it at least twice already, but the rationale behind just looking at students with percentile scores at or above 50. What's the why behind?
Yes. So when we looked at all of the students who participated, we were searching for impact. So I'm going to make up a student, right? They were in the bottom 10th percentile. So they were only doing better than 10% of their peers. So if they're at the very bottom, what we sometimes call high need.
Okay.
Let's say we had, at Shirley, right, we had some of them sign up and come back. When we looked at their scores, there was no impact. So when we looked at the 10th percentile, when we looked at the 20th percentile, right, we just kind of go through the data to see what it's telling us. It is only when we arrived at the 50th percentile or above that we started to see the statistically significant impact.
So you have data of folks who had no impact at all?
Yes.
The high needs?
So we looked at their data. It's not that we selected it out. It's that when we looked at, let's look at the 10 percentile, let's look at 20, let's look at everybody, let's filter 1,000 different ways. It was only when we only found evidence of impact when we got to that 50 percentile or above. Does that make sense?
Kind of.
So I guess the other way I would say it is, we could enroll, right? We could enroll all of those students in the 10th percentile. The program as it is run now, right, like back in time, last year, they could have all participated. So hundreds and hundreds, thousands. They would not have seen an impact. If that, does that kind of, I know
So
that's
it's
a
not that
high
you didn't have high need, there just was no
Correct.
impact.
Correct.
So
Yep.
So that's the result I wanted everybody to kind of think about and chew on, including, and the staff is working on this and thinking, okay, because it's not our job to come up with new programs, it's our job to say, hey, this is a problem for us. Please think about it. With your partners. Any other questions? Thanks so much for that.
So welcome.
thank you.
Yeah, not a problem.
All right, next on the agenda is the minutes. I have a couple of corrections. Nancy Myers-Preston, who's been facilitating our retreat, is here. Her name is spelled a little differently, and I can get this to you, Rebecca, at the end. Meyers. And we also wanted to add in Diane Cameron. And with that, or if anyone has any other suggestions, please add them. Otherwise, I'll take a motion to approve the minutes from February. Alyssa and Matthew. So Alyssa moves, Matthew, you'll second.
Sure.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thanks. Next up is the treasurer's report and check register. Adam, Chuck, is there anything that you want to point out to us as we look through these? Anything interesting, unusual, or surprising?
No, the only reason I'm thinking that's why we're in the negative figure is that there's been a lot of annual contracts that were spent out in January, and we don't normally spread that out over the year to participants if it's come. I believe that's what happened in the majority of it. Other than that, everything else I think was pretty normal.
Well, thanks for explaining that, that's helpful. Any other questions on the treasurer's report? Or about a check register for last month? I'll take a motion to approve the check register.
Make a motion.
Allison, Andy seconds. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Committee liaison reports. So first up is a nomination committee. And lucky for you all, I chair that committee, so I can really report. Alyssa, Jenna, and I met earlier this month to talk about the election coming up in May. Arlene joined us as well. And we talked about having a prospective trustee meeting, which we've had the past few years. People who are interested in running can come and learn about the process and get some more information about running. And that's going to be March 26th at 6 p.m. in the Tompkins Lab. And then we reviewed some of the materials that we are planning to provide at that meeting. So we planned the agenda. And lastly, we updated the questions for the community forum. So library scheduled community forums on May 6th and May 8th. And so the questions, we've changed the questions a little bit for those. Any questions or comments?
I'm sorry, you said March 26th at 6 p.m.
Yes.
But I
yes.
know someone who's kind of interested.
Can you provide their name to us?
Right now,
No,
No,
later.
no.
Yeah,
I
but
just want to know.
well, and just to like play off of that, if you do know community members who are interested in running for the board, it would be great to encourage them to attend these sessions where we're going to be working really hard to get that information out.
Next up is the facilities committee.
So facilities committee met. It was myself, Arlene, Matthew, and Scott joined us. And we had a bunch of items. I think we'll be looking at this capital fund expenditures, so that's a little later. And we'll be looking at IT server later. Let's see. I did want to update you particularly that we are getting close to finishing up our walkthroughs of the buildings. And if you recall, we have the maintenance staff, Dan is doing a full review of each building, all the mechanisms, all the furniture, all of the, any facilities or capital issues. And we now have a binder, and the committee now all has copies of this binder, which outlines all of the items that are reviewed. Very helpful. We'll be looking at Bach next and Washington Avenue, and we are really shooting for June completion on that. And so you will see this facilities budget, the capital budget requests reflect directly the many of the issues that were outlined in these assessments. So it's really, it's kind of a nice thing to see this thing coming together and seeing the direct results of that and being able to tie that. It makes us committee members feel, I think, that we can stay on top of anticipating stuff that's going to happen with the buildings now that they're turning 10. Any questions about any of that stuff? Okay.
Anything else to add from Scott, staff, or committee members?
well said.
She summed it up.
What was that?
You summed it up.
Oh, good.
Are we going to get the rest of the board going to get a presentation when the,
So we've included a MOU, which is a little bit of a smaller, or memorandum, which is a little bit of a smaller presentation than the full presentation that the facilities committee added.
right, I'm thinking when this is all done.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, so not now, but in June, July, maybe, but
A presentation on what?
the whole
walk.
Oh, yeah,
five-year
yeah.
plan.
Oh, that,
We can do it.
yeah.
Then we kind of know what's coming or what we anticipate coming. Great. I'm looking forward to it.
Forward to having it done.
Thanks, Alyssa. Personnel committee, Anna.
It's been a busy time for the personnel committee. We've been discussing how to go about MC raises, and after some discussion, the committee decided that we would create a memo that basically advises Scott about how to go about giving these raises, but gives him autonomy to give them up to 5% above the threshold, the raise threshold. So basically, it gives him a little bit of flexibility while also, if we go above a certain threshold, that raise has to come to the board for approval. That memo has been reviewed by council and is now ready. I think, are we presenting that memo to the board?
It's on page 17.
Yeah.
I
And
think
it
we're
will
gonna
be
vote
ready
on
for a
it.
vote
Is it on
after these minutes. We have been reviewing a grievance by a person who was dismissed from the library, and the grievance was brought to the personnel committee. because it went immediately to a level 3 grievance and because of the nature of it. We determined that we agreed with the action that had been taken, and as a result, the union is bringing the grievance to arbitration. A list of potential arbitrators has been sent to our council, who will review with the personnel committee, and then we will decide together who the arbitrator will be. No?
No. That's,
Sorry.
that's, PERB decides who the arbitrator's gonna be.
They will decide who the arbitrator will be. And then we have to, we're looking at changing some of the job specs of our MC staff. Some of the job descriptions don't accurately reflect the work done by the staff. So we're hoping to expand the human resource manager job to include finance manager responsibilities. And we're going to adjust that to an L3 designation to better include staff acting in a management or confidential capacity. And so, for instance, our facilities manager, his job does not reflect what he's actually doing, and so we're going to be working on reflecting that job description better to his actual position. In addition to the title changing for these two L3 positions,
They're not L3s.
they're not currently
They're not.
L3s, they will be become.
No,
it'll
because
just be
they're
the-
administrative staff.
Oh, why does it say L3? I did the minutes wrong. I apologize. I'm gonna get better at this committee.
No, you've got it.
Oh, okay. We're adjusting them to L3
So
designations.
this is a different
It's a different
issue.
position.
This doesn't.
Ah,
Those are the
sorry.
L3s.
Okay, I apologize.
It's not even a different color.
In addition to changing the title of two L3 positions, we're going to be requesting salary increase that's above the 5% raise threshold. And so that would be brought to the board for approval. In looking at these positions, Alyssa proposed looking at the entire administrative suite to make sure that salaries are in line with industry standards. So we're hoping to, as a committee, create some goals for administrative salaries so that we don't just jump everybody all at once, but so we have a better understanding of what industry standards are and making sure that our staff match that. Any questions? Since I got like 3 things wrong.
So, do we need to add to the agenda, the MC raise memo, right? And are we approving the MC job descriptions for those two positions? No.
No,
No.
we talked about revisiting them again because you wanted to see a red line copy.
Oh, so that note had to do with all of the whole thing?
Yeah,
Okay.
we're scheduling another meeting April
Gotcha. Okay.
1st for approval next meeting, ideally.
And what about the increases? Is that coming tonight or later?
The increase we could talk about today.
The MOU, I mean, the memorandum that's in there, that talks about, that should be voted on tonight because the group moved on that.
Yes.
But the other things, they're just a review and we're going back again. And the committee has requested for additional information.
Okay, even this one?
Yep.
Okay, all right. Any other questions? All right, thanks, Jen. Okay, director's report.
So in February, the Pine Hills Branch screened a documentary brought to light unearthing the history of African American Cemetery in Kinder, New York. The Bach Branch had the Children's Museum of Science and Technology, who offered a 3-week residency of hands-on science at the branch, underwritten by the Albany Public Library Foundation. Washington Avenue Branch, the first Saturday for Families Play-Doh Party brought in a record-breaking number of attendees, 153. At Arbor Hill West Hill Branch, we had a dance-off. We're doing a dance-off pretty much every Monday, which has gotten very popular with teens and tweens and gotten some energy out. The Howe Branch, in partnership with the League of Women Voters, hosted the first African-American TV news anchor, shares his story. This was with Ken Screven. The Delaware Branch winter school break activities went well. They included Cupcake Bash, Supa Epic Dogman Party, and Clifford's Big Red Birthday Party. And the North Albany Branch had a special story time with WMHT, and that was a Clifford theme as well. The business office completed the library district's final audit. CMS has finished back-end work for a database to report how our collection is performing and what we can do to improve circulation. IT deployed half of the new branch servers. The executive director attended February PEG board meeting to remind that board of APL's responsibilities to the studio and talk about the library's strategic plan and specifically value-added partnerships. In March, a weekly computer class for adults started at the Delaware branch. Whereas also the March 20th Wonders of Science program at Pine Hills will discuss new windows on the universe, which is from telescopes to satellites. Washington Ave will have started a 6-week program for youth on graphic design. On March 26th, the Bach branch will host a presentation on the history of the Women's Club of Albany with Patty Kapach. The library will also be taking part in this year's St. Patrick's Day Parade. We did so last year as well. Also a note, the parade on Saturday, March 16, will affect operations at Washington Ave, which is along the parade route. We will be providing porta potties in the front and closing the Washington Avenue entrance from 1 to 5 p.m. In years past, the branch actually closed due to the behavior that happens in front of the building, though in the last 3 years it has been open. We've tried several tactics, including putting multiple community, actually putting the director at the front door and being the bouncer. Last year we had more CECs, the year before that we had more CECs, and we basically had our facility staff acting as kind of bathroom guides. But last year we actually locked up the front door, and that worked really, really well. We did get some complaints, but it worked really well, and the porta potties have always been effective. So I think this is the best way to still have the library open and to have the parade going on, and it keeps patrons and our bathrooms safe. I also wanted to share an email that I got out of the blue this week. This is from someone, and I just wanted to share the text from it. The past couple of weeks, I've been visiting several library branches in the Albany area. I've been pleasantly surprised at the abundance of resources available to patrons. Between the sewing classes, the painting classes, and the opportunities for fitness and story times for children, I've been blown away that so many amazing opportunities are available at my fingertips. I grew up in Rockland County, about 2 hours south of Albany, where I was a regular at neighboring libraries. I do not recall having access to such a diverse body of resources like I have in Albany. Thank you for all you do. This was shared with all the supervisors, and this will be shared with staff tomorrow. Statistics, it was a very, we continue an upward trend for the library. So far, circulation is up by about 4.6% compared to February last year. We're still down 11% to the 3-year average, but up 5% year to date. High performing branches, which is really making me happy, is Arbor Hill, Bach, and Howe. We haven't seen a circulation at Arbor Hill or Howe in years, so we're really excited to see those numbers really perform well. And then the high performing collection was juvenile and young adult. We think this got a really big bump from going fine free. Programming attendance is up 14.5% across the district compared to February of last year, and that's up 12.5% to the 3-year average and 6% year to date. So we're performing fairly well with programming. As we'll talk about in the community report, it was down a bit last year, so we're really happy to see that. Washington Avenue, Arbor Hill, West Hill, and Howe are our high performing branches, and both children's and adult programming are our high performing ages. Our door count is up 4.5% compared to February of last year, and 4.75% compared to the 3-year average. Our high performing branches are Washington Avenue and Howe. And then room use is up 29% across the district compared to February of last year, and 18% compared to the 3-year average. This is driven mostly by study room usage. Study room usage is up and very, very popular. Washington Avenue is our high performer in terms of branches. And then computer use is flat. It's about 2.35% across the district compared to how we performed this time last year, and flat compared to the 3-year average, but we saw a pretty big spike last year. And of course, desktop usage is driving that a little bit, and Wi-Fi is up 2%. Washington Avenue is without a doubt our computer branch. Seems where we have the most computers, but it's also where computer usage is very, very popular. And then the fifth stat that I always kind of introduce, it's a different stat every month. And this is just to give you an idea of what branches, you know, have the lion's share of numbers. This year it's programming. Washington Avenue, of course, is our leader. But also notice how well Howe, Delaware, and Pine Hills and Bach all do. They hold a pretty solid piece of the pie. So again, it's possible this is going to be a really good programming year for us. I'll open the floor to questions.
So there was a nice little memo at the end of the package about 6 servers are being retired. So is it 6 that are coming in and after them?
Yes.
And it talked about how expensive they were, and I don't want to get involved in too many details, but are they cheaper than the ones that were listed in the memo, which I think was $2,200 a piece?
Yes.
Thank you.
I had a question about computer usage. So I just wondered if, is the desktop use so booked that there's not really much room to get around?
No, not right now. If you go to most of our branches, there's still desktop computers that are available. So, you know, at Washington Avenue, there are busy times where there's probably a queue, but not like there used to be. There used to be like 7 people waiting for a computer. I think now we're at about 2 when it's busy, if that. So the express computers are helpful. You have to also remember that we have the Chromebooks that are available, that staff are really good about, you know, when someone's waiting for a computer, explaining to people that they can actually go to the desk and borrow a Chromebook. Since we've changed the age, Chromebook usage by teens has gone up considerably, which makes a lot of sense. I think teens are naturally attracted to using a device as opposed to a desktop. The overall desktop usage going up last year and not really dropping so far this year is a really big surprise, but I don't know. I think it was Mary Kuhn who explained it really well, which was these are, it seems like we're getting people who can't do things on their cell phone. In other words, job applications, taxes, possibly in the future census, looking for places to live. Some of those applications are too difficult to do on a cell phone, so that's when they're coming in and using our cell phone. The fact that we're so close to DSS, that drives a significant amount of traffic for our faxes, for our notary, and for our desktop. It's also why our door count is very high. I think it's about 45% of our overall door count comes through Washington.
Wow.
And I really want to commend the Washington Avenue staff. The metrics are really good for Washington Avenue. We're seeing an increase in usage where we were kind of seeing a decline in the past. You have to remember that we've brought on a new L3, and also we've brought on a branch manager, and I think some of the things that they're doing at this particular location is being reflected in the numbers.
I was just wondering about programming space at North Albany. Are we any closer to having?
We will talk about that in executive session,
Oh, okay.
but I have really good news.
Yeah.
Any other questions? All right, well, thank you so much, Scott. Now we move on to new business. So we need to add the MC raise memo. Maybe we'll put that at the end. So we'll start with the tax cap override for the proposed 2020 budget. Who's going to explain that? Thank you, John.
Explain the resolution.
Yeah.
So this is the same resolution you pass every year. In order to effectively budget as far out as you do, you have to make some assumptions about what tax cap will apply to your 2019 budget. One of the key factors in the equation is not yet published for January 2019. So we can make some assumptions as to whether we'll be in the tax cap. You can use the school district's formula now, but you can't actually know whether or not you will or won't be within the tax cap until sometime. I think the factor comes out in September or October. So because of that, libraries like APL are in the position of having to pass a tax cap override resolution every year just to protect yourself from some uncertainty in that number. Now, I know right now the board is at least entertaining the idea of not increasing taxes at all, and in a year where you're not going to increase your levy at all, theoretically that would be a pretty safe year not to override. But in the unlikely event that you actually had a negative number, if you didn't have a tax cap override in place, it means that you'd have to turn some of the money you potentially collect back because the levy could actually go down. So in any event, same thing as every year. This is a belt and suspenders approach. We suggest that you pass it. We've talked about whether or not it makes sense to revoke these in the future. As I've explained to you, given the current state of the law as it's currently written, there's really no need to do that. This has to be done before you make any decisions about budget, before you make any decisions about tax levy, anything else that you do tonight. So the resolution is the same one you've passed for the last 6 or 7 years, however long the tax cap law has been in place. And that's it.
All right.
I'd like to make a motion to pass the tax cap. A second.
Okay, any discussion? All right, all in favor? Okay. So, and
Are you
that-
saying
that was yes, so
Yes.
no.
opposed?
And are we missing Matt?
Matthew left the room. Yeah.
I'm just wondering what the implications of that for the vote.
Collect his vote when he returns.
Well, you can table the motion and vote again when he returns, but we can't vote at a later time. So we can just hold this until he
Yeah,
comes back.
let's hold it.
We good?
Right, you don't need to, I mean, it's
also-
passed.
It's passed,
Yeah,
right?
it's passed.
I was more just.
But he might want to be on record for that.
Well, it's the board's will, but the board has voted, so if you don't want to do that, you're gonna have to take some step to reverse that at this point.
So I suggest we move on, but if someone would like to make a motion to.
When he comes back, you could reconsider. You can
Okay.
make a motion to reconsider
Okay.
if he wants to have his vote cast on that.
Given that he's not in the room, and the next item on the agenda is to finalize the 2020 budget, I'm going to suggest we do something, that maybe we do the MC memo now, because I would like him to be in the room, to discuss the budget, yeah.
Well, I think he's probably back momentarily, so
I'm sure,
we could start.
I'm sure that he'll be back very soon, but I don't want to talk about it. I'd rather wait, we can just wait, or we could do something.
Want to do the community report? It's a presentation.
Sure.
So you were not the first group seeing this. We actually went through and did 3 test runs with staff as a practice, but also to kind of to make sure that they knew the message that we were putting out there in the community. Last year when we did the community report, that was one of the big things that we learned from the staff, that they knew we were doing it, but they didn't necessarily understand this. So again, you're not the first group. However, you now get a much more polished product. So as we know, community report for 2019, this is something that we do across the city. This year, I think we have 20 to 21 neighborhood associations that we will be doing this report at. And I think it's really a service to the community. I think we've kind of gotten some board members from it. And I just think it's a good thing for us to do. So, in 2018, we loaned out 640,000 books and materials. This is a decrease of about 6%, but as we all looked at the numbers last year, the last 2 to 3 months of 2018, we were actually seeing an increase in circulation. So my hope is that we're bucking this national trend, because the national trend is circulation dropping year after year. We saw 830,704 visitors at our 7 locations. That's an increase of about 4%. We provided 215,233 public computer and Wi-Fi sessions. That's another increase. Was that an increase of 4%? 5%. We hosted 56,329 people at programs, activities, and events. That was a small decrease. This is the first year programs has had a decrease, and I'm hoping this is just kind of a readjustment. And then we hosted 8,940 individuals in our meeting rooms, in our study rooms, or people using our meeting rooms, and that's an increase of 4% as well. So 2018 was a very good year for us. Highlights, we expanded hours at 3 branches, Hal, Pine Hills, and Washington Avenue, adding a total of 6 hours to our weekly service. I want to give credit to the staff. They really dove deep and figured out when we should be open. I always tend to want to be open evening hours, but staff at 2 locations convinced us to be morning hours, and we actually saw a pretty big increase in our door count from being open in those morning hours. The MVPs of the 2018 report is actually the IT department, who ensured faster connections on public computers and Wi-Fi by upgrading internet bandwidth, an increase of 5 times the original speed. Biggest complaint I got when I started this position was how slow our computers were. All of our frontline staff will tell you that was probably a big complaint at reference desks, and we've not heard those complaints in a while. We secured $500,000 in alternative revenue sources through pilot payments and shared service agreements with building tenants. This includes CDPHP Cycle and Albany Community Action Partnership. We received a 94% patron satisfaction rating in a survey about library services, programs, and materials. Our growing Readers Early Literacy program and CDPHP Workforce Challenge Charity of Choice and awarded a $2,000 grant. This is an early literacy program. The APL Foundation was instrumental in securing this funding, as well as other grants and annual appeal donations, allowing us to put on special programs and projects for patrons of all ages. And APL was named by the Times Union as one of the Capital Region's top workplaces. This is the first year that there was no other library in this listing. 2018 was all about community partnerships. The Albany Public Library Foundation providing support for special programs, including Growing Readers and Art at APL. CDTA, Salem Navigator, passes and branches, generates revenue, and increases the number of people coming in our doors. Albany Community Action Partnership, which rents space in Washington Avenue for 3 Head Start classes. Albany Promise, who helped us do a study on the impact of the summer reading program. CDPHP Cycle, which rents space and storage and maintenance of operation at our Washington Avenue branch. And of course, Senior Services of Albany. This is a kind of what we call an old school service, which was delivering books and doing pop-up libraries at retirement communities throughout the city. Albany Public Libraries add value. More than 56% of our staff live in the city of Albany. We are your neighbors, and we proudly serve you. We enhance a sense of community. I always describe this as, if you think of Main Street, and Albany is really a bunch of main streets spread throughout the city. It's one of the things I like about Albany. We are the anchor stores of those main streets. We're a destination for people who have retired, which is a growing trend in the city of Albany. They visit for fellowship, books, lectures, resources, and even fitness classes. And of course, we're a resource for small business owners who use our branches as offices for printers, computers, Wi-Fi. And secure commitment for annual PAL payments that will help us reduce reliance on fund balance contributions to the operating budget. This is a year of a strategic plan, whose goals are dedicated to meeting community needs, the community as a learning platform, cultivating leadership, and long-term sustainability to ensure the public's investment is maximized through efficient and intelligent management of resources. I'm not going to spend too long on this because we're going to do this whole show later. So we're going to be short. What is APL doing great in 2019? Well, first, we've gone fine-free. We've eliminated fines on books, DVDs, CDs, and audiobooks starting in January. We waived old late fines on these types of items for all APL patrons. And the goal is to decrease barriers and increase access for patrons. And then our second big project is Wi-Fi in city parks. We are partnering with the City of Albany's Recreation Department to provide access in 3 parks. That's Washington Park Playhouse and Skate Park, Lincoln Park, and Blinker Swimmer Park Stadium. The goal of this project is to help bridge the digital divide for our city's residents and expand library services, not just outside of the branches, but to provide, again, more 24/7 library service. Our proposed budget, the board is considering, and after this budget meeting, we will change this, a 0% tax increase in the 2020 library budget. The final 2020 budget will be approved by trustees at the March 12th board meeting. If there is no tax increase over the 2019 budget, the 2020 budget will not be put to voters. There are 3 trustee seats up. We know all this, the nominating process. We definitely had a conversation with staff when we did this presentation about making sure everybody knows about the packets, so that was an issue in the past. The candidates will be announced in late April, and the election is on Tuesday, May 21st. And did you know, we have 7 neighborhood branches, which together make up Albany Public Library, and you've probably seen the hashtag, 1 library, 7 branches. And that is a shortened version of my presentation to save time. There is a sign-up sheet or a list inside the packet of every neighborhood association that we've been booked with so far. If you are interested or if you are going to attend one of those meetings, please reach out to Rebecca and let her, it's a separate handout. So that will be distributed. If you, please let us know you're coming, and Rebecca is the contact person.
Do you want any feedback?
Sure.
Okay. Two thoughts. One is, you know, we know what pilot is, but I'm not sure, are you
I'm
pinning
going to
that
explain
down?
that. You've got the shortened version,
Okay.
just to let you know the pieces that are going to be touched. But Stephanie, one of the reasons why we do it with staff and if you practice runs is I think the second go-around explanation was the best one. So Stephanie and I are going to go back and kind of do the explanation. We just said pilots move taxes, didn't want to get too into it, but I think we're going to go through our notes. We'll have a good explanation. There is no perfect way to explain it.
Yeah, I know.
It's
And that's
really,
what I was wondering.
it's not easy, so our first go-around, I didn't really explain it all. Which Stephanie, I thought, was throw a water bottle on me. Second explanation, we had about three, I think it was about a 3-sentence explanation that resonated with most of the staff. Third go-around, I got into the weeds too much.
The other thing is fine-free. I think this is I mean, we've gone public with it, obviously, but this is the first time you're gonna be in front of all of those neighborhood associations, and they are gonna have opinions about that.
Yes, so we already have all the talking points and everything ready. So we are prepared. To be completely honest, we have probably about 3 things that we know we're gonna get questions about and we're prepared for them. Some of them are mentioned, some of them are not. We know that we will get questions about direct food story time as well. And then we know we're gonna get some questions about some changes at some of the branches when it comes to programming. So we've prepared ourselves to kind of answer some tough questions. We get tough questions every year.
It just a thought about the content here on Fine Free. You might just add a couple more bullets under one of these to say why we went. The statistics are compelling, and that might.
Might help us all.
So.
Thank you.
Any comments or questions?
Do you think this sums up? And I mean, we
Did a
have
great job.
we have a neighborhood association president here,
It's good.
and it's good to get your feedback. But we also want you to know what we're saying, so none of it surprises you when people from the community come.
Scott, on the last slide, the reference to when the candidates are going to be available is a little bit later this year. It's going to be early May.
Okay,
What?
early May.
Candidates will be announced in early May.
Candidates will be announced in early May. That's where they're appropriate.
Is that new?
It's May 1st is the deadline now, right? We've got.
So that changed? Okay, so.
Okay? Thank you, everyone.
And it's, actually, I think it would be helpful if you can add the candidate forum.
Sure.
It's on
It's
Well,
on there.
It will be for the public, this was for staff.
Oh, great, okay.
Yeah.
Great, thanks. And let's get that sheet going around, because I think it is, Scott very kindly suggested we go to community report meetings, I would much more strongly suggest that we get out to community report meetings, at least in your own neighborhood, if not more, so that a board member is with staff, or Scott and staff at every meeting.
Oh, you want it passed around?
Yes,
Okay.
passing it around, because we're signing up.
Okay. I thought they were taking it home. Sorry.
No, no, no.
Sorry, Rebecca.
All right. Thank you very much. That's great. Okay, Matthew, welcome back. We did some stuff while you were gone. So now,
Do you want to bring that tax override again?
just let him know what happened. So we voted on the tax override while you were out, and it passed with 7 votes. It needs 6 to pass.
Okay, I would have voted for it,
Okay, but we're good. We don't need to go
Yeah.
back. Okay.
just so you know.
So we waited on the budget though, because we wanted you to be here for that. So, the budget is on page 30, 31, 32, 33. And who wants to choose that? Scott, do you want to do that?
Sure. So we took the advice of the group from the last board meeting, and we did a little bit more of a drill down on the budget on page 32 and 33. This isn't a full drill down, but it gives you a better idea, especially on the revenue lines. One update is the foundation at its board meeting on Thursday decided that it will be paying for programming that it awards through grants directly. So it's no longer reflected in this budget, but it's definitely something they will revisit in the future. So the day after the meeting, I called some peers around the state just to see how their libraries handled it. Everybody handles it differently. The 2 options that I thought made the most amount of sense is either an MOU with the foundation getting a set amount of money, or the other option was to have them pay for things up front. Out of, I think, the 6 libraries I called, it was almost split how it was handled. So the board discussed it at their board meeting, and that was the decision that they came up with. I know Karen, I was not at the meeting. I was there briefly to talk with Lex.
I'm not going to add anything.
Okay. So if if we are interested in handling this differently in the future, if we want an MOU, that is definitely something I'm more than willing to explore. But I think for the time being, this is a good solution until we get this figured out and get the relationship figured out, especially after the Friends Foundation merge.
All right, so let's do motions and then we can discuss if we want to discuss more of the groups. So,
I'll make a motion to pass the 2020 budget.
great. Thank you, Allison. And Sarah, second. Great. Any further discussion on the 2020 budget?
I just want to make one note about one discussion item from the last board meeting, which is the CDTA sales and commissions. The librarian 3s and the senior clerks are doing a deep dive. They've already handed me some reports about what the impact is on the workflow for the organization, and I will report that out next board meeting. Also, serendipitously, that's when we will need to sign an agreement with CDTA, and that next morning I started to put pressure on them after the board meeting to negotiate a higher percentage for us. We are the 2nd highest performing organization for Navigator passes, Price Chopper being the 1st and the lowest out of the water. But I think we're in a good place negotiation wise, and my goal is to double what we're taking in.
Any other discussion on the budget from trustees? No? Ready? All in favor? Everybody said yes.
Wow,
Thanks.
that's important.
It's a first, 3 years.
Okay. So, next we do the tax levy, which I'm not seeing on the list, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a resolution there only as a placeholder in case you don't need it, but
Oh,
if you
we don't
are
need it.
not going to increase it, which is the budget you just passed, then I don't think you need to pass that resolution,
Okay,
because you're not putting that question out to the voters.
right, okay. But we do have to do a trustee election notice.
You do, and that's in your,
Do you wanna- That is, where is that? Is it in the main packet or is it in the extra packet?
The resolution,
Yeah,
it came,
page 35.
thank you. All right, so we have a resolution to put the trustees on the ballot. I'll take a motion to do that.
I'll make
Melissa, thank you. A second. Jenna, thank you. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor? Aye. Motion carries. We need to review the nominating petition instructions to candidates. I think that's, follows that in the budget. Who's going to be,
I can explain it to everybody if you need to, sure.
that would be great, thank you.
So in your packet is a document that every single one of you has seen before, but it has changed slightly this year. There's two documents. First is the requirements and procedures document, which is the text Q&A, and then the second is the petition. So no major changes this year to any of the process except that, as people probably are aware, the Board of Education members are now being voted upon at the May annual district meeting, which is consistent with the way school districts around the state do that. In Albany, there used to be an exception created by statute that had that happening at the November election, general election. A few years ago, the legislature passed a bill to change that, and indeed now they're being elected in May. So, how does that affect us? Well, you wouldn't think it would affect you at all, except that Albany being a small city school district, unlike most of the school districts around the state, has a slightly different deadline for candidates to submit their election nominating petitions. Instead of it being 30 days prior to the election for regular school districts, in small city school districts, it's 20 days. So Karen actually mentioned this to me a couple of weeks ago and just said, you know, is that going to create some confusion? Certainly it could create confusion if our petitions were due 30 days before and theirs were due 20 days before. But more importantly, the way the library election statute is written is we are to do our election in the manner that the school district does their election. And because of this change, because there is now the 20-day rule that operates, I think that the only way to interpret that is that we need to follow the 20-day rule. So I spoke to the school district clerk. Actually, I spoke to Paula Tibbetts, who is the superintendent secretary, formerly the district clerk. There's a brand new district clerk this year. And she was fine with whatever we decided to do, was happy that it was on the same day so that she doesn't have to worry about multiple deadlines. But that is the only change that you're going to see, is that now you're going to follow the same date as the school district, which is May 1st, rather than what it used to be, which was usually fell around the 20th. It was the Monday after the actual day that it was due. This also moves it away from the school break. That almost always happened to fall during school break week, and so it moves it away from that as well. So anyway, that's really the only substantive change. The instructions are essentially the same as they always have been. As everyone knows, you have to have 25 signatures, or excuse me, the greater of 25 signatures, or 2% of the number of votes that were cast in the last library election. The last library election had 3,213 votes cast, so if you do the math, that turns out to be 65 votes. 65 signatures are what would be necessary to be elected to, or not to be elected, to be nominated to be on the ballot. So, you've got a form that allows you to collect 12. You're going to have to obviously do a bunch of those to collect all 65. As with anything, when you're collecting signatures, I urge candidates to collect more than the 65 because heaven forbid one of the signatures are invalid. Somebody who lives in Colony and really thinks they, are in Albany because their mail comes to Albany, signs a petition and it's invalid. You just have to be aware of that. So same drill as any thing. And again, the instructions lay all of this out. And an ode to our very own Stephanie Simon. They are printed on letter-sized paper. It used to be on legal size, she hated that, so we moved that. Okay, any questions about that?
I have just a little question about the number of signatures. So if somebody asks me, it's actually 64.26, wouldn't that round down to 64?
No, because you always have to have
it's people,
at
so-
least the number.
Okay.
So you don't ever round down when you're doing the election. It's always a round up. Because if you don't have at least 64.27, you haven't been nominated.
Any other questions? We don't need to vote on this part, do we?
No, this isn't for voting, this is just for a thing, and now that you've passed the notice,
Yeah.
this is available to the general public for anybody who wants to run. And, people can start collecting signatures as early as right now.
So Stephanie, can you just tell us where this will be available?
We'll put it on the website in quick links, and then there'll be a budget page. We'll put it in several places on the website. It'll take us a few days, probably early next week, to get the packets out to everyone, so it's a lot of papers to put together, but our aim is for Monday.
Okay, but it should be on the website soon.
I didn't say this, I think everybody knows this, but we have two full-term seats, okay? So the two top vote getters, highest number of votes cast, will get 5-year terms. And then, as everyone knows, we had a resignation currently being filled by Arlene, but Arlene's term will end the night of the election, and the person that is elected to the third highest number of votes will begin their term immediately, and they'll serve from the night of the election, or as soon as they take their oath of office, until June 30th, 2020. So they'll have a year and a bit. And then that seat will be filled for a full 5-year term next year. Okay, so three seats available.
Right. And one, it will be vacant. Because Andy Bouchard is term limited. He cannot run again until next year, really.
Yeah, that's correct.
So, all right, thank you, all of you, for putting that all together and getting the word out. Let's do the MC raise memo now. Does anybody want to talk about that? Or have we talked about it enough?
Jenna, do you want to talk about it?
No.
Okay, that's fine.
So I will just, only because I took I put pen to paper on this after P&G sort of laid out the parameters. The document is a document that has been board approved previously. And what it is in parallel to the approach the board took with the executive director's compensation when Scott was hired. This is essentially a board statement of policy. And it goes through all kinds of different things. Salary is but one topic in the document, as you can see. The only thing that you're changing right now is to add some verbiage to salary to address essentially a change in schedule. Because it used to be that all of your evaluations, library-wide, were done in November. And as a result of that, all of your pay increases, library-wide, were adjusted in September. That held true for MC employees, it held true for union employees. But in the last union contract, management negotiated out that date. And so now evaluations and by operation of the evaluation salary increases are done on a rolling basis. This essentially is a change to address that so that during the course of the year, as a person reaches their seniority date, their supervisor will do their evaluation, and that works fine with respect to the union employees because that's a fixed salary increase driven by what the salary table in the contract says. But with respect to MC, these decisions have always been a little bit more discretionary in the executive director and board. And so when that was all being done at one time, it was fairly straightforward and easy, but as we all ran into it, as it started to get off cycle, you had to start making decisions about individuals and what individuals were going to get over the course of the year. You had some uncomfortableness when these were coming up before the board on an individual case-by-case basis. I gave you an opinion that said you don't really need to do that level of detail at a board approval thing as long as the board has given the executive director both a budget and some authority. And so this language talks about what that budget and authority is. It's really a long way of saying it just tells Scott what the guidelines are for assessing raises for the MC employees, i.e. the people who are not covered by the collective bargaining agreement. Okay? So I think it's clear, but that's not the test. So it's really, really important that everybody understands this. I know Scott and I have talked about it at length, and he thinks it's clear, but this is going to be the board's statement of policy for him to follow in setting these things. So, it's critical that we all, make sure we understand what it's doing. It's essentially creating two caps. There's a guideline for the total amount, and then there's a guideline of it can never be more than this without it having to come back to the board.
So it was approved by the Personnel Committee, so that's the first motion. So I'll take a second motion, then we can discuss. Sarah, thank you. Any questions, any more clarifications anybody wants on this memo? Oh, and just to clarify, Bob, you said P&G.
It was actually personnel.
It was personnel, just policies. Usually go through P&G, but not personnel policies. So any other discussion or questions anyone wants to have, or are we ready to vote? Okay. All right, all in favor? Aye, all right. Everybody said yes. Great, now we are on strategic plan update.
Thank you, Mary, for being IT.
And we have two handouts. There's the presentation, and then there's some metrics that looks like that we got separately. I don't remember it.
No, go back to
Hold on.
Who sent it to you, Mary?
Stephanie sent it to me.
Oh,
Did you send the?
I just sent you the presentation.
yeah.
I think if you go to share with, no.
I'm sorry.
It's in your email. So we'll just look at your email.
No,
You can, I get punchy around 7:50.
So you actually want to go to your drive. Go to slides, Steve. And share on that. No, it didn't. You gotta say
I'm
yes.
sending it to your drive right now. You have it.
Try refreshing it.
Go to your, share with
As you can see, Mary is an often requested presenter in the library. So this is our second report, and remember that this is a snapshot. So this is from, this was prepared I think in January, so we're actually a long farther than this report's out, but due to weather and then having a packed agenda, we decided to move it to the tail end of the quarter. So we might actually do the next report out in the next, not April, but probably in May. So remember how we measure success. We have unassigned, which means no tactic at this time has been assigned. We have tactics assigned, which means a tactic has been created and assigned to a team member. We have a planning process. Tactic is assigned. Team members are planning how to implement that tactic. Plan implemented, which means they came up with a plan, the plan's been implemented, it's started, and the work is being done. And then we have measurable outcome. So we set measurable outcomes. This means it has an outcome that can be measured. So this report was suggested to me, instead of going through the full strategic plan, we will actually at the end talk about where we are with the full strategic plan, but diving maybe a little bit deeper in each kind of goals. So we're going to start with goal 1, which is meeting community needs. And the goal statement is, we intend to align services with community needs by providing exceptional programs, material, outreach, and public interactions that promote literacy, lifelong learning, and civic participation. Our first objective is to develop multiple types of literacy in the community, including digital literacy, early literacy, cultural literacy, and life skills. Some of the tactics are define all types of literacy associated with this objective. And the idea is to complete and distribute literacy guides for our staff, which will guide our programming going forward in the future. The second tactic is to standardize, formalize, and create a curriculum for early literacy programs across the organization. Again, this is the drafting and completion of a guide for our staff. This is a really important one for me. I know that we have some lifelong early literacy program people in the room. They've been bringing their children to early literacy programs for years now. This is something that we do really well, but we don't have a standardized curriculum. And the idea is to align this curriculum with some of the things that are going on at APL, since they're already a community partner, and also the Albany City School District. So taking our early literacy programs and knowing that what we're doing in them are preparing our students for pre-K and K. And then standardize, formalize, and create a curriculum for adult literacy programs across the organization. Same idea. This is adult computer classes. This is financial classes. This is home buying classes. Making sure that the programs that we do, the level of quality is the same across the 7 branches, and they align with best practices that we recognize locally in the state and across the country. Objective 2 is to regularly assess the needs of users and non-users by using various forms of engagement, which is to create dynamic surveys that focus on specific user types. In other words, if you signed up for a computer class, you should at some point receive a survey saying, how was your computer class? How can we do it better? When should we schedule these classes? And then also create an avenue for patron requests and suggestions, not just through policy. We reviewed that policy last board meeting. But to do this on a regular basis, we've actually started this in part with the new comment cards. And this is to actually say to the people who are coming in the door, what would you like us to do more of? What are some of your suggestions for the collection? What are some of your suggestions for programs that are going on, hours, services, and level of service? Objective 3, evaluate and strengthen programs and services to best meet community needs and work within organizational capacity. So we need to evaluate and strengthen the programs we have and services that best meet the community needs. This isn't just internal. The last slide is about internal, keeping our current patrons happy. This is about getting out in the community and finding out why people aren't using this more and what would be attractive to them, but simultaneously not just doing more, making sure we're within organizational capacity. Making sure the staff aren't doing more programs just for the sake of doing more programs and burning themselves out, and maybe burning out our patrons who are like, we've got 1,000 programs, we cannot move to all of them. And then to create an evaluation metric template for all programs to make sure that our return on investment for the programs that we are doing meets the needs of the taxpayers and the people using the library. And then objective 4, build broad awareness about the diverse services we provide and promote the impact of our quality programming. Again, outward facing. Research and identify new ways to reach out to the community. Broaden e-newsletter and program guide distribution with more focused content. Make it more attractive to people who may not be library users. And then identify community partners where we can promote APL. We've done a fantastic job over the last few years of getting a lot of community partners. We need to start identifying the community partners that are willing to help us raise awareness in the community of their users. So, where are we in terms of meeting community needs? Right now, we have 3 objectives and 10 tactics. All five are assigned. 3 are in planning, 1 is implemented, and 1 actually has an outcome. Again, you will see a big jump in the next year. So I think we're fairly in good shape. A lot of these are going to actually move over to. So where are we overall? Success. We already have some successes and some measurable outcomes. And so these I will continue to repeat every time because I think it's good to be reminded of the success that we have so far. We have created a programming guide that will slowly be distributed among staff. That's a new one, and that's a part of meeting community needs. Our bandwidth has been increased by 400%. I was told it was actually increased by 500%. Our goal was 50%. The foundation has sponsored 9 programs this year. These programs will be highlighted in the next appeal, and they will be a part of our community report. And our pilot payments have eliminated the dependence on our fund balance in 2018 to 2019, and will allow for reduced dependence in 2020 and 2021. Overall, we have 13 tactics which are assigned. We have 10 which are in the planning stage. We have 6 where the plans are implemented. We have 4 where there is a measurable outcome. There are 3 that are still unassigned. I will leave that to the board president to address those later on in the number. And that's the report. Do we have any questions? No?
Wow,
We're doing, and I think, are you happy?
that pie chart, man, look at that pie chart.
So,
And colors.
My only comment, am I allowed to comment?
you can make a comment.
Yes.
This is part of the baby.
It's just to remind everybody of the length of the strategic plan. You know, this is not a one-year strategic plan, so it's unrealistic to think that everything is going to be assigned and accomplished in 1 year. But the progress,
Had it in there. 17, this
is
is,
through 2020.
yeah, this is 17 months into 36 months.
Yeah. So, I mean, your progress is really commendable. But again, this is not a one-year plan, it's a 3-year plan. So, progress is incredibly impressive.
The staff, particularly the staff who are assigned to this, have really taken this on. You can see the progress also in this handout, these handouts. The black squares actually will tell you where we are. I think this is actually an easier way for some people to recognize where we are in terms of success. And again, you're going to see a big jump the next time we report this out, because these are a few months old. And also, if you go to stats.albanypubliclibrary.org, if you go to the strategic plan tab and click on it, this will also give you these a little bit more of a deep dive in these, and also will be reminders you can click if you can pull the tactics up as well. But overall, I think the staff have done a really commendable job in moving the strategic plan, investing in the strategic plan, discussing the strategic plan, and moving it forward. I think it's been communicated in a way by the administrative staff and the leaders that are on the ground to staff in a way where there's a little bit more buy-in this time around, and maybe buy-in when they don't realize it, which sometimes is a good thing. Where they know that this is important for us to move forward. They're not concerned about the metrics, they're concerned about being a better organization. Thanks, everybody.
So I just want to address the three tactics unassigned. So if you don't recall, this is Nancy Myers-Preston who helped us with the strategic plan, and that was great. I just really love seeing the progress and so happy with how the whole thing turned out and is working. But we brought Nancy on with her colleague Diane Cameron to help the board with the board objective and tactics. So I'm hoping that addresses all three tactics, and we can talk about that later. So we're going to start working on it next month, right? At the board meeting, we're going to be talking. So, any other comments or questions on the strategic plan? All right. The information technology decommission.
Melanie's here, so that's perfect. Do you want to talk about it, Melanie?
So we went through having a little extra money at the end of last year due to pilot payments. We were able to update our servers, which had gone out of warranty, and were in need of replacement. So we went on, there were 12 servers that we identified needed replacement. We replaced 6 of them. So we did, what it is each of our branch, besides the main branch, or besides Washington Avenue, has 2 servers. They have a main server and a backup server. So what we did is we decommissioned or took out the old backup servers, moved the current server to the backup position, and then bought new servers to replace. So we have the best as our functioning one, and then the second best as our backup servers. In that process, we have now decommissioned 6 of the servers. We have removed the hard drives in those. So any of our data is still ours, but now we have the servers that are able to be reused by other locations. And Upper Hudson has identified, I believe, 2 libraries that are in desperate need. I mean, they're so desperate that they're using our really old servers out of warranty with no hard drive. That's how desperate they are for new servers. So they would like to see if we could transfer our old servers over to them.
So just because this seems new, in the past, IT just kind of handed equipment over to Upper Hudson. And I said that's not the appropriate way for us to handle it. Things need to be decommissioned.
Hello, patrons. It is now 7:33 p.m. We close tonight at 8 p.m. The computers are going to shut off automatically in 12 minutes at 7:45. You have plenty of time, though, to check out some of our CDs or DVDs and all our books. Bring them to the front counter where we'll be glad to work with you.
So this is. So this is how we're going to handle it going forward, but I think this is really a way for us to give to the library community and the smaller libraries and be a part of the Upper Hudson community in a good way.
That's very nice.
So we're going to move on that. So I'll take a motion to Jenna. Okay, second, Matthew. Any more discussion? All in favor? Unanimous.
We should put a little sticker on them that says "Go find free."
Yeah.
So that consider vegan.
All right, so next on the agenda is quarterly evaluation of
We still have to do
the executive session.
the capital fund. Is the capital fund?
Yeah, where is it?
Oh, I was blind on the agenda. So it's not on there. Well, we'll hand those out anyway.
What is this?
This is just the board evaluation, we're just handing that out. But we need to vote on the capital fund expenditures, and I think it's a memo on page 15. That we saw in advance. So this is a recommendation from the facilities committee, right?
Yes, I'm happy to talk about it if you'd like.
Let's just second it and then we can discuss it. Okay. So I'll take a second. Someone on the facilities committee, Brenda, thank you. And is that great?
So I will tell you that the expenditures suggested at Washington Avenue were not reflected in, or in Bach, are not reflected in our assessment evaluation. because we haven't gotten there yet. But the others, Pine Hills, Delaware, Howe, and Arbor Hill, are reflected directly back to our assessment, facilities assessment. So in the memorandum that we received in the committee, there's a direct link to those recommendations in that report. So that's how this is going to work going forward. And if you remember, we, at our last board meeting, designated the reserve, the capital fund at $3 million, as recommended by our bylaws. And we have this capital. We have buildings in need of work. And so these are the recommendations. Scott very ably went through them. We're happy to answer any questions people have about them.
I just have one question. In here it said something about designating a male second floor bathroom. I was just wondering why we wouldn't go.
Tell us about the
No,
bathrooms.
And I was gonna bring the pictures, but they're locked in my car.
Okay.
So, yeah, it's been a day. That's currently designated as a male bathroom.
Okay.
And what we'll be doing is making all of our bathrooms non-gender specific, single use. And one bathroom, we will actually be changing the orientation of the door so that it's for the community room. So that if we're doing story time in the community room or a special program in the community room, instead of needing to run out into the hallway and use the bathroom, they'll be able to access the bathroom directly from the community. And then the second bathroom, the female designated bathroom, will become a single-use bathroom, and the doors will be locked. We will be moving towards more of a locked door situation in Washington due to security concerns that have been growing. And that bathroom in particular has been a site of drug activity and some other activity, and that worries me because it's on the same floor as the children's room. And those bathrooms, if anybody wants to come and take a tour of those bathrooms, they're in horrible condition and need to be fixed.
I'll just ask another question.
Yes.
I know the New York State law about nursing. Is there any plans of any designated nursing
So we
spaces?
had a designated nursing space, and it wasn't utilized.
Okay.
But our feeling is we can actually work with the women's bathroom, since we will be reducing the size of it, so that maybe we create something that could be for nursing. Like I said, we had one on the first floor, and between pushback from the public about not having 2 single-use bathrooms, and it's underuse, I don't think we publicized it well enough. I think we can definitely do something on the second floor, and that way it'll be closer to the children's room, which might be used a little more. We've been doing designated nursing spaces for staff for a while now, and we're definitely open to doing it for the public. We did it before the county.
Anyone else? All right, all in favor of designating capital, spending capital fund on these repairs? All right, great, thanks. Awesome. Yay, we spent capital.
And just so the board knows, this will be reported out separately. So this is us decoupling capital expenses from our operational budget. So you will see a separate kind of a separate budget for just capital expenses, which is on the advice of, what's best practice. What Adam and I have discovered is best practice. And so you'll see an additional sheet when these funds start.
Thank you. Very exciting. All right, so I passed out the quarterly evaluation. We need to do executive session tonight. So let's see if there's any public comment. Hello. Hi. Hold on.
I'm short like Queen Victoria.
Oh. I just wanted to tell you how it works. So, that's all right. Thank you so much for coming and providing comment. We've got 5 minutes, and we would love to hear from the public. We want to hear from you. We're not going to respond.
Okay, that's not a problem. Great. Some of you already may know me. My name is Veronica Thomas. I've been in the system now for going on 31 years. I'm a past president of the union, and I'm actually here as a union representative. In years past, the union used to send people to board meetings to observe and to possibly comment, mostly to observe and to show that we're interested in what the library is doing and that we want to be a part of it. So you will be seeing me or another union member at future board meetings. The practice has kind of fallen by the wayside, but we're trying to revive it right now. And ironically, tomorrow is the 26th anniversary of the 1993 blizzard, March 13th, which actually started the union back in 1993 because supervisors were disciplined for letting people go home early during the blizzard. So there's a historical component to my being here tonight as well as a regular component. And that's what I have to say.
Thank you.
Okay, so we need to enter executive session to discuss a real estate issue that may be affected by the discussion. We need to do an executive session to discuss a
Real estate matter that
may
could affect
affect
its
its
value.
value. Yes. I'm gonna get better. So I need a motion. Allison.
I'll make the motion that you just stated.
Excellent. Andy, second. Thank you.
Who's taking notes as to when we're doing this?
I got it.
So Melanie, you're gonna do it?
Yeah.
Did you just volunteer? Awesome. Thank you.
So everybody else on staff can go. Thank you.
Nobody seconded the minute vote.
Yeah.
Yes, Pelican.
Oh, we need to vote.
Yeah,
Right.
I will second it.
No, Andy already seconded it. We just need to vote. Executive session. All right, great. We're all